Valkyrie has been around for a while now and was added to Apex Legends all the way back in Season 9 and still continues to see play in part due to her overall movement, but mostly because of the strength from her ultimate and of course the thickness. I played Valkyrie for 100 hours and here's what I learned. She has 2 or 3 passives because as a new legend, of course she does. Her first basic passive is the Recon, which allows her to scan beacons and get herself caught mid-animation by one of the hundreds of rat teams crawling around. The second passive is her Jet Fighter HUD, which activates during her skydiving or using her ultimate, marking any enemy with a direct and uninterrupted line of sight within 250 meters. What's good about her passive is that it's easy to spot rats and not needing to try as hard when looking for enemies around you, but it also has the added benefit of telling you if the scanned enemy is either the champion or the kill leader, which is great if the champion of the lobby is, say, a known hacker, since you can easily know where the champion is dropping and just steer clear of that general area. Valkyrie is just great for avoiding fights and running away from the action if you want to hide the whole game, making her perfect for professional Apex Legends. And finally, her third passive is her VTOL jets that lets Valkyrie fly around, either traveling vertically, horizontally, or both. This tiny ability is amazing to quickly boost yourself up on smaller high grounds or to take angles, or just confuse the hell out of your opponents as you jump between floors of the buildings like the one in Fragment. When rotating, you can cover ground faster by toggling your jets on and off. This helps a lot if you're looking for dodging maneuvers when rotating, for example, allowing you to bunny hop from left to the right when taking fire and making yourself very difficult to hit. When falling from a height, you can also toggle your jets at the last moment to slow yourself down and stop yourself from getting hit by the fall stun. Speaking of toggle, switching the VTOL jets from toggle to hold is a must, and you can easily do that in the gameplay settings. When using the VTOL jets, you want to try to avoid flying in straight lines and definitely avoid flying too high. Try to find the sweet spot where you are off the ground enough to maneuver around and get the angles that you want, but don't fly straight up into the air taking height, as you are incredibly easy to beam both when holding your jets and when you are coming down. Keep in mind that when you are using the VTOL jets, there's a small hand animation that plays at the very end as you let go of your passive. This normally doesn't seem like a big deal, but you very quickly learn about it when you try flying into a full team, and you just kind of die as Valkyrie is pulling out the peace sign. You can actually combat this to some degree, and you do that by aiming to land on ledges, so you can pull off a mantle at the very end. This saves a little bit of fuel, keeps you exposed for a smaller amount of time, and most importantly, it cancels the peace sign animation. Honestly though, I wish that using your jets played a like animation, because that would be such a good segue to ask you guys to hit the like button. Wait, didn't I just do? As we've seen in the ALGS, Valkyrie's jets have a lot of different uses, and if you find yourself in the final ring when the last few teams are fighting, rather than joining the fight on the ground, flying as high up as you can and then maybe using your tactical on the enemies below. This gives all the team in the lobby a chance to fight each other, which could net you a lot more positioning points, and you're probably going to catch your enemies off guard as you finally land in the middle of the zone with full health. Moving on to her tactical, the missile swarm doesn't seem that special at first, but once you start playing around with it, you start to figure out the many ways it can be used to apply pressure. It doesn't necessarily deal game-changing damage, but can be used to either whittle down surrounding teams in a passive lobby, poke players who are playing behind certain cover, and of course hitting yourself in the face. Except the last one, these are all great reasons to use it as much as you can. You can play around with the angles to figure out how to hit your enemies. Her tactical can be deployed when you are midair and even when using your VTOL jets. So if a target is on the low ground underneath you and you want to angle your rockets downwards, try flying upwards and then use your tactical to angle more rockets to hit underneath you. Just be careful not to get beamed by any of your teams who might be looking around for you. There's also this lesser known trick to instantly send rockets behind you when you're running away to surprise and maybe even hit enemies if they're close enough. In order to do this, you just start running, you slide, jump, look down, and use your tactical. This will send a swarm of rockets right behind you, but does take some time getting used to, so I recommend practicing the timing in the firing range before you get yourself killed. Finally, the ultimate skyward dive allows you to basically create a balloon out of thin air and take your team airborne, flying up to hundreds of meters away, with the range depending on all the obstacles on the way, as well as what height Valkyrie dropped her ultimate at, since it launches you at about 100 meters up into the sky, so if you pop your ultimate from a hill, you'll travel a lot farther than if you were using your skyward dive from the bottom of a pit. Speaking about ulting from low ground, you used to be able to spin around when deploying your ultimate to make it harder to hit you and your teammates, but that has since been fixed. This means that you want to be careful when using your ultimate near enemy teams and try to have cover for you and your teammates, not only when you're standing on the ground but on the way up as well. As a rule of thumb, you're usually safe as long as you manage to do the launch animation and go about 50 meters up into the air without taking damage, but some teams are crazy beamers and they might still snipe you out of the air. Her ultimate is what keeps her the most relevant. While Wraith has her tactical as a get out of jail card for herself, Valk's ultimate is basically a get out of jail for free card for the entire team. If you get locked out of a rotation because teams are holding the edge of the zone, or where you want to pass through, you can simply get behind cover, pop your ultimate, and fly over their heads. Also, make sure to look at his graph and hit the subscribe button so the Ottr gang can hit 500,000 subs. Thank you. The ultimate is also useful to making simple rotations, especially when getting into god spots before anyone else does. This also goes hand in hand with her passive. You generally want to play for the third circle, meaning that you look for a scan around when ring 2 closes and then rotate in, ideally with a Valkyrie ultimate, since there are going to be a lot of teams where the zone closes, but nobody should know it as accurately as you, which means that there might be a lot of spots ripe for the taking. If you're in a great position and know that you won't use your ultimate for a good while, it could be worth deploying your ultimate to fly around the circle and scan out where all the teams are. It gives you a general idea of what to expect leading up to the end game, and it might give you vital information, like for example the specific positions of rats for easy kill points. It's also worth noting that unlike other scans, such as Bloodhounds or Seers, enemies marked by Valkyrie's passive actually aren't alerted of the fact, and this might give you an edge once you land. Keep in mind that despite this, most players at this point in time suspect that they've been scanned whenever a Valkyrie has been flying, unless of course they've been in hiding. Remember that using your ultimate won't guarantee a rotation or position in the end game. Most good teams know that they need to show presence when holding a position, especially when a Valkyrie is flying so they don't get landed on. But there are teams who either intentionally don't show themselves to lure Valkyries in, or are just absolutely clueless and get you both killed. Since two teams fighting in the middle of where the final zone will pull means third party and death for everyone involved, except that one lucky team. If you're locked out of the final ring with the zone closing and every single position is taken, your best bet is actually trying to stall as long as possible. Use your ultimate to fly into the sky and then simply continue gliding around the zone in circles to stay airborne for as long as possible, looking for either a good position to take or a third party to land on. Go for weird angles and out of bounds plays if possible. Your job in the final rings is very often just to stall and make sure that your team can stay out of the fight for as long as possible. As for her loadout, I found that really any mid-range weapons fit her the best, since you're working a lot of off angles and high ground angles that usually are pretty far range, and Valkyrie has a tendency to go for the high grounds at most times possible. That being said, I'll always vouch for a shotgun as a secondary, but you might get away with running a marksman rifle or a sniper rifle if you feel that you'll be holding a position and sniping for the better part of the game. If you're looking for a more technical guide on how to play Valkyrie, I've actually made one of those as well, and it's available on the screen now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow.